Global climate strikes aren't the only way activists are trying to hold world leaders to account. Jojo Mehta is part of a group of environmentalists who are fighting to see widespread environmental degradation recognized as a crime against humanity on par with genocide. She's the co-founder of Stop Ecocide, and she's in New York City. Jojo, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Let's define the terms here. What is ecocide?
Ecocide is defined as large-scale and systematic damage and destruction to ecosystems. In other words, serious damage to the natural living world.
And obviously, some would argue we're seeing this right now, but what would make it, in your mind, a crime against humanity?
Crimes against humanity are considered an atrocity crime at the International Criminal Court. We aim to add ecocide to that list of crimes. In a sense, we're looking for a standalone crime here of crimes against nature.
So if we were there right now, this week the UN issued a new report that said that sea levels could rise by 1 meter by the end of this century, and that will result in mass displacement. There'll be immense human suffering. But could you even find a single actor to prosecute for devastation of that kind of scale?
The way that atrocity crimes work at the International Criminal Court is that they are aimed at persons of superior responsibility. In the same way as with genocide, you wouldn't prosecute an individual soldier, but you would prosecute the general or head of state. In these instances, in the instance of mass destruction of nature, you'd be looking at government ministers, CEOs of corporations, and so forth.
To that end, you've been quoted as saying that Jair Bolsonaro is something of the poster boy for the crime of ecocide. Why is that?
It's really because the situation in the Amazon has this year really come to the fore, and because Bolsonaro's policies have been to kind of roll back on protections, both for nature and for indigenous rights. And what he is engaging in falls really quite neatly, if you like, into a definition of ecocide. And so the word has started to be used in the mainstream media in a way that has not happened before.
So then I can see how he would be useful in forwarding your cause. But practically speaking, though, what would have to happen in order for ecocide to become a prosecutable offense in international court?
The procedure is actually relatively simple. Any head of state that's a member of the International Criminal Court can propose an amendment to the Rome Statute, which is the governing document. Mm-hmm. And then in order for it to be adopted into that statute, one needs a two-thirds majority.
But when an industrialized country like the U.S. pulls out of the Paris Accord, why would you expect Brazil or India or China or Canada or any other big industrialized nation to sign on to this?
Well, the great thing about it in terms of getting it on the statute books is one doesn't actually need the big players to do that. If you're looking at 122 members, which is currently the case, you're talking about two-thirds of that membership, and none of those two-thirds have to be those big polluting players. And because of the phenomenon of universal jurisdiction, even if a country doesn't sign up and ratify it, if they are committing those crimes and they set foot in a country that has ratified it, they can be arrested. So there's a marginalizing power in it, even against those who don't ratify.
So that's obviously for, as you have said, the people that you believe are responsible for major destruction. But individual citizens, have you been getting pushback from individuals who worry that maybe because they have a carbon footprint or use plastic products, they could find themselves on trial in The Hague?
Certainly people ask us that, am I committing ecocide just by driving my car?
Right.
The simple answer is no, because what we're looking at here is the large-scale and systematic destruction of ecosystems. We're not looking at consumer levels.
But you mentioned individual companies earlier. You might not be going after consumers, but what if it's their employer who's being taken to the courts? Could they lose their livelihood?
Conceivably, but I think that what we need to look at here is actually the preventative effect of creating a law of ecocide. Because if you think about it, once there's a country or group of countries that are prepared to table a law like this and to say damaging the earth that we absolutely depend upon is basically the equivalent of damaging people, your insurance companies are going to think, okay, well, this is going to be coming down the road. Your bankers are going to be thinking, maybe we need to watch what we're funding if this is on the verge of being illegal. And so, we believe that, a law like this actually will have to come into play at some point. All we're trying to do is accelerate that point in order to protect humanity.
You got resistance this week from the National Review, who say that the actual goal of the ecocide movement, you're laughing, is thwarting enterprise and opposing capitalism. What do you say to that?
What I say is that is an absolutely classic example of the biggest opposition that we get. And the biggest opposition that we get is from those who are deeply, deeply entrenched in the current economic structures. In other words, who believe that, enterprise in the context of perpetual economic growth is what we should all be aiming for. Now, this is actually a complete fantasy. When you look at what's happening to the earth, around the earth, to continue to think and to act and to operate our societies in this way is simply suicide, quite literally. It's the extinction of our own species, looking at us in the face. And unless we can actually address how do we go about our businesses, our lives, in a way that treats the earth with respect and that starts from a principle of first do no harm, unless we do that, to be absolutely honest, we're doomed.
But we have a role to play as individuals in taking on that challenge. Is putting world leaders on trial for crimes against the environment really going to save the planet?
Well, in our ideal world, that's not what happens. In our ideal world, this is proposed, it goes through the procedure, and while that is happening, it's very visible. It's there on the horizon. It's coming. That means that policies change. That means that rules start to change. That means that attitudes start to change. In our ideal world, by the time this is actually on the statute books, nobody will be in the dock because everybody will be doing different things in different ways. And so effectively what you will be doing is you'll be preventing the harm. Right now, by climate litigation, for example, or by suing a company, you're forcing compensation. But if you actually make the thing illegal, ultimately what you're doing is stopping the harm. And that's what's important. I mean, a simple parallel would be, it sounds quite brutal, but you can't beat up a mother and then pay her for her bruises and think that's okay. That's what we're doing with our planet.
Jojo Mehta, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Jojo Mehta is the co-founder of Stop Ecocide.